Welcome to Up Close, where we go into the deck with some of the top names in poker. In today's show, we catch up with the first man to win a £1 million paycheck at the poker table, Englishman John Duthie. November 16th, 2000. It was the day you won £1 million. What do you remember about that day?
A lot and a little. It was a momentous day, and I just remember vaguely walking out of this room knowing that I'd done something very significant, but not really realizing how significant it was until maybe 2 days later.
Who were you as a poker player before you won that tournament?
I would say I'd never really had a very large win like that before. I was your average club player who played maybe twice a week in limit small tournaments, which the biggest prize was probably £3,000, £4,000, £5,000.
Back then, it was the biggest buy-in ever in Europe. How did you get the money to buy in?
Actually, funny enough, I won it. I was running quite bad at that time, and I won I came third in the Omaha tournament at the Vic. About 3 weeks before the Isle of Man. I had no intention of going to the Isle of Man, and I remember sitting down I sat down in a live Omaha game and won. I think I won about £1,000, and I was going to go. And this tournament was about to start. I think it was about a 1,500 buy-in tournament. And somebody said, and I said, oh, I'm not going to play in it because I'm not running well. And he said, well, why don't you just play in it? You're on a free roll. So I thought, yeah, okay, I will. And so I sat down in it, came third, won about 25,000, and used 6 of that to enter the Poker Million. So from £300 to £1 million. So I played very solidly for the preceding days of the tournament, and then the whole idea was to turn it up on its head when I reached the final table and go for gold, because there was no point coming third, second. It was because it was
million to first.
You had to go for the whole hog.
What do you mean premonition?
Well, I don't know. I had this very strange sense even though I didn't want to go to the Isle of Man, I somehow knew that I was going to win it. I don't know. I was just so zoned. I was so feeling so good about myself. Life was running very sweetly. I just really knew I was going to win it. Not in a sort of every poker player thinks they're going to win it. I actually really knew I was going to win it, and I haven't had that feeling since.
You uttered the immortal words when you won. Honey, it can be done. What did that mean?
When we were supposed to be doing something. My wife and I were supposed to be doing something that weekend. I can't remember what. And I said, look, babe, I've got to go to the Isle of Man. I've got to go and play in this tournament because I'm going to win it. And she said, oh, don't be stupid. It's just a waste of £6,000. And so I said, no, look, I'm sorry, I've got to go. I don't care whatever happens, I'm going. And so she said, well, you'll never win. And so when I said it, it was just to tell her that I had won.
What happened after £1 million? Did you want to turn pro?
Not really. I didn't let it. I think I recognised that it was pretty much a one-off situation. Though I'm a moderate, I don't consider myself an incredibly good no-limit hold'em player. I think I'm probably above average, and on my day, obviously, I have the capability to be able to win any tournament, but. Going pro didn't really go through my mind, because I see professional players, and at that stage, we're talking about 4 years ago now. At that stage, poker wasn't where it is now. It hadn't really reached that. So the pros were real grinders. They were playing week in, week, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, grinding away. Sometimes they had good months and bad months, and their income was going up and down and up and down. I was lucky. I had a very good job, which I still enjoyed. So I was actually back at work on the Monday. We played on the Sunday, and I flew back, and I had to go back to work on the Monday after. The people at work were just flummoxed because they knew nothing about it. I think I'd said I was going on holiday for the weekend to away with the family, so I think I lied. But they just couldn't believe it. They just thought it was a very strange thing.
Playing on TV seems to suit you.
I've got this. I don't know. I think that I feel very at home in the television studio, when there are cameras around. And it's interesting that in the Poker Million, after about half an hour, and I was just talking to somebody about this downstairs. After about half an hour, I realised that we hadn't seen a flop at all, and because it was live television, I remember thinking in my mind that this must be really boring for the viewer. So it was almost as if I started to direct the tournament from then on. And so what I'd resolved to do was actually call the next pre-flop raise with any mediocre hand. So I remember Tony Bloom raised with a hand, and I looked down and I had Queen Jack. So I just called so that we were going to see a flop, because we hadn't really seen a flop yet. So we saw the flop, and the flop came out. I can't remember what it was, ace, deuce, something or other.
Ace high.
Yeah, ace high flop. And Tony was first to act, I remember. And he paused and he thought for a minute. And then he put in a bet, which was actually it was an interesting, because he'd waited for such long and because he'd bet at it, there was something in me that said he hasn't got an ace. Okay, so I just decided I'd resolved to just move all in. So I moved all in, and of course he passed. And once I'd done that, I got this sense that I was actually directing my own destiny there, and that I was not only was I directing the actual game, I was thinking of the viewer. I was thinking this will be entertaining, and luckily it paid off. So it was kind of strange. And once I'd done it 3 or 4 times, I built up such a level of confidence that I became mentally pretty invincible, I think.
What did you get geared up for after that?
Yeah, I'd already been to the World Series a couple of times before the Poker Million, with not very little luck. So I carried on going. I played in a few other big events, but mainly I was still focusing. My career actually took off quite a great deal, not as a result of the win. It just so happened that my time, I started to do a lot of work at that point. So I didn't play that much poker in the first couple of years after the Poker Million. So. But I went to Vegas, and that was my 2 or 3 weeks poker, and I love Vegas, like you.
Can you survive in Vegas for a month? Don't you go insane?
I go a bit mad. The bells and everything drive me a bit mad after a while. It's just getting in the lift and hearing Danny Gantz's name over and over again. And it's everything. It's like Groundhog Day. Every single day is the same. You get out of bed, you go in the lift, you go down to the Bellagio Cafe, you have your 3 eggs, which is too much. You sit there. Maybe you'll meet somebody and say hello. Then you'll go and you'll walk past and. Somebody will something will be calling you from the blackjack table, so you go and lose, $2,000 or $3,000, and then you go up to your room and start chasing your losses. And every single day becomes this ridiculous chasing or winning or losing, and then playing poker and joining a tournament. I think after about 3 weeks, I just feel completely exhausted.
What about people who play poker for a living? Do you feel like you're outside of it? Do you think that they have a good life?
I think I certainly feel outside of it. I think that professional poker players only really look at other professional poker players as peers. I think anybody who has a career outside of it, they consider a non-professional. I liked the way my life used to be, which was working for 6 months or 9 months of the year, and then spending the other 3 indulging in this hobby. Now it's because of its success, they've kind of overlapped each other, and so my TV career and my poker career have become interwoven. And the only sad thing about that is that I don't play as much now as I used to.
Especially with all the money on offer.
I know, it really depresses me.
So now you've started the EPT. Where did that idea come from?
Well, it started in the bath, like most good ideas, and I was just thinking, what am I going? It was in January last year, 2004. I was lying in the bath, and I just suddenly thought, what am I going to do? Like most people do in January, think, what am I going to do this year? I was just lying there and thought, okay, well, Europe needs an organised series of tournaments similar to the WPT. So it was a model that had already been tried and tested in America. It was going really well in America. So I just thought, well, I'll try and do the same in Europe.
What did you want different from what was going on in Europe already?
I think that I think it was necessary to get a televised tour up and running. that there were lots of individual events scattered around.
How did the deal come together?
Just hard work, you know, like most projects like this. I was just saying to Warren downstairs that, you know, I've got an enormous amount of admiration for Steve Lipscomb, because when you actually do something like this, you realise the amount of effort involved. You know, you're negotiating contracts with casinos, you're negotiating contracts with broadcasters, you're flying here, you're flying there, you're having meetings, you're having conference calls, you're setting all these things up, and it really does take a lot of hard work. It's just sweat, you know, it's just sweat to get these things up and running. And that's the only way it does. But it was the right time. You know, I'd already tried to do this about 4 years ago, before the WPT. You know, I'd gone to TWI with the idea of a European poker tour, you know, a long time ago, and they just couldn't see it. They just didn't get it. You know, otherwise we would probably be at the same sort of level as the World Poker Tour now.
Two big issues on the EPT: logos and added money.
Well, I think it's because I'm a player, and I think that the logos is very important from my point of view. The headline sponsors tend not to want, the marketing guys for the headline sponsors tend not to want the competition to be seen at events that they feel that they're paying for. Now, I disagree. I've always disagreed with that, because I think from the player's perspective, you have to be, you know, the players are putting an enormous amount of their own money into this, or used to. A lot of them are sponsored now. But they used to put a lot of their own money into these events, and, you know, they were risking that. And the television companies, you know, whoever was filming it was gaining enormous amount from their sacrifice. And so you know, it's really important, I think, that players are able to wear logos, you know, from whatever company. It doesn't matter who it is, so that they can actually get their expenses paid now. And as for adding money on, I just think that it's a gesture. You know, I think this is a gesture which could be made and should be made wherever somebody's making profit out of. You know, we're not making a profit yet out of this. Certainly I'm not making a profit. Maybe this will happen in the second series. Maybe I should have waited to add money on until later. But I managed to persuade, you know, the headline sponsors that it was a good idea to do this, and they agreed.